Do not set yourself up for failure. Within every equal partnership's formation is the seeds of its own destruction. I know it's the hardest thing in the world, but the earlier you have the conversation, the better. And I've done it 50 times probably, where I've looked at a team of 3 and I said, this is never going to work like this. The 3 of you need to go sit down in a room and decide who's
the leader,
who is actually the leader. And by the way, you already know.
Yeah.
You just haven't said it to each other. Who is the leader? And then that person is going to own more of the stock than the others. It has to be that way. And he stops and he looks at me and he goes, you really don't understand, do you? He said, you know that GE has $6 billion of free cash flow a year, and we have to deploy that someplace. You solved the problem for me.
Yeah.
And I went, every investor who's out there is looking to deploy money.
Yeah.
If you have a good company that can take his money and put it to use, you're solving a problem for the investor.
Yes.
So quit worrying about trying to solve your problem and go out there with confidence and realize that you're actually solving a problem for them.
Welcome back to the Startup Ignition Podcast. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'm Tyler Richards. This is John Richards. We are your co-hosts. Thank you so much for listening to all the episodes. But today we have a very special guest who we've been trying to get on the podcast for a little bit here, and he's been around us for a long time. Probably someone that I met through you because you were interacting with him when I was still probably in middle school. And not to age anybody here at the table, but today we are joined by Craig Earnshaw, and I have a bio for you, Craig, and I hopefully you took a look at it because I don't want to mess this thing up at all. But you are a very seasoned entrepreneur. You started a company all the way back in, the 70s or 80s?
78.
That you ended up selling. It was called LifeLK Corporation. And through my dad, John told me actually when I was preparing this agenda that you actually rebought it and sold it again and had a couple of iterations and go at that company. But you are obviously very tenured entrepreneur. You are a founding member of the Park City Angels, which came to claim and very famous throughout the early 2000s, 2010, investing in a ton of startups here in Utah. You are a adjunct professor at BYU, which I've been invited to cover your class a few times, which is one of the best classes I think on campus, which you're in charge of. You have a rich history in Utah's startup ecosystem, not just through investing, but also mentoring and all the companies that you've been involved with. So we could go on forever about Craig.
He's a legend.
Yeah.
Also, you left out Utah Angels, which is where we really got to know each
that's
other,
where you guys actually met.
He was both Park City Angels and Utah Angels simultaneously.
And what weren't you? Didn't you guys get to know each other?
BYU Founders
for the
group.
Founders Group and everything, and you guys have probably traveled a lot.
I think we really met at Utah Angels.
Yeah, Utah Angels we met, but also we were involved as BYU Founders together, and we've traveled the world
Done a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah. Well, so thank you for coming on. We're super excited to have you. I'm excited to jump into your background because I actually don't know a ton about your history and that corporation and that selling and rebuying and selling again of that company. I'm really interested to hear that story. But before we get into it, I don't know if you've watched any of our episodes on the podcast, but this is
episode 15, I think, right?
Yeah, this is episode 15. Yeah, 15. A podcast is fun, but man, it's a lot of work. People just don't understand, right? But it's fun. But because we get to talk and have conversations like this, but also every podcast episode we do an icebreaker, which is just we take like 3 to 5 minutes and do something for fun to just kick off the episode, and then we'll get into the agenda and everything that we want to talk about.
I'm most afraid of. But go ahead.
So it's really fun. We usually just do simple little games, and today we're going to play a one-word answer game. So I'm going to ask you questions, and I want one word.
And it's both of us playing?
Yeah, you both can play. Is that okay?
And no psychiatrist will be watching.
Yeah, no. And if there's anything crazy, we're going to leave it in, but we're going to tell them we're going to edit it out. No, just kidding. But no, we're going to do a quick icebreaker. So to kick it off, I'm going to give you each a question, and I want Craig and John to respond with one word, okay? Okay, so here we go. It's startup centric, so don't get too frightened here. It's going to be easy. What's the most critical trait in a startup founder? One word.
Tenacity.
Passion.
Love it. Okay. Preferred investment stage.
Earlier the better. Very early.
Pre-seed. Early.
Pre-seed.
Yeah.
Angel, family and friends.
Yeah. Let me make a comment on this question because it's
This is supposed to be one-word answers.
It is, but that is pre-seed. But I just want to say that Craig and I, in the angel groups we've been involved in and all the venture investing we've been done over the years, we too have really stayed at the earliest stages. There's very few that stay. Most angel investors that do early stage start going, well, I lost my money there. That sucks. I'm going to go later stage and get less risk. But I view it, and I think Craig views it, but the bang for the buck is great early on. I mean, you invest early, and if you do it right and you're good at it and you mentor.
Who wants a 10X?
Yeah. Or a 3X, right? I view it this, when you do Series A and B investing, you're going to get like a 3 or 4X maybe. Yeah. And it's boring, isn't it, Craig?
Boring.
I know, exactly.
You don't want 3X your
we
money?
like the 20, 40, 60Xs.
Yeah.
Or 100X.
You know, I have a couple of 1000Xs too.
I know.
So you really?
Yes. That's
Wow.
You are not getting a 1000X in an A series. So.
No, it's never going to happen. That's what we want here, Benny.
Okay, so
that was a great question for Bruce bringing up. That I look back, I tell everybody all the time. In Utah, really, over the last 20 years, all the people that helped make Utah what it is from the investment side, Craig and I are probably the only two that have stayed at the earliest stage because they flee to later stages for safety, and I don't think it's there.
I was going to say, what do you think sums that reasoning up? Like, why do you think a lot of the original Utah Angels and even a lot of the original...
Exactly.
Why? It's risk.
Yeah.
It's too risky for them?
I've given this talk several times to angel groups, and the talk goes like this. Here's why you're not succeeding as an angel.
Yeah.
You came in, you were super excited, you did too many investments, too much invested, first of all.
Yeah.
And too many too quick. So you got burned out. Now you're 2 years into it. None of your deals look good at all.
Yeah.
You've done 10 and you're quit. You're going to quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything I read, and by the way, my experience shows you have to do 20 or 25 deals before you're going to get lucky, by the way. It's mostly luck. And one of those hits. And by the way, once one of those hits, then you can't stop. You will never stop.
Yeah.
But every angel I know, almost without fail, does 10 or 12, gets discouraged, quits, and quits taking swings at the plate, so doesn't have a chance to.
Yeah, and so they're just burned the rest of their life.
Yeah, I ditto.
Okay, back to that was a great 1,000 word answer.
No, but I wanted a teaching moment after our 1 word answer.
Yeah,
we
okay.
both said pre-seed.
We can elaborate on the 1 word answers.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be funny. Okay, next 1 word answer. Biggest red flag in a pitch.
CEO doesn't come to the pitch. That drives me crazy.
So no CEO.
No CEO at the pitch.
The word want to.
Like what? Like give an example.
Any company that says we want to do this.
Yeah.
If they're
and
not
you're not
saying
currently.
if we're not saying we do this, this is who we are.
Yeah. Like
Even if they're not actually doing it yet, they need to mentally
assumptively say they're doing it.
They need to mentally own it and be saying, this is what we do.
Does that stem from you're not buying the future of what the company is, you're buying what it is right now? Or
I want people 100% bought in.
Yeah.
And people
and have a clear path.
I teach this in my class. When you do your pitch, don't say want. Say this is what we are, this is what we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's good.
That's great. Okay, here we go. A few more, just a few more. Best or most interesting industry right now?
Well, I'm super scared of AI.
So you're anti-AI.
That's same.
No, I'm not anti at all. I just have no idea how to invest in it because it's going so fast and so crazy.
It changes every week.
Yeah.
So what is okay? So what's the most promising or most interesting industry?
And he's an investor in our fund, and our fund we're the same exact look. We don't know if next month today's hot AA company is going to be disintermediated.
Right.
Yeah.
So it goes back to SaaS.
SaaS.
Yeah.
If you can put it on AWS and charge a monthly subscription, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
B2B SaaS. There you go.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it doesn't matter if it's utilizing AI or if AI is being intermingled into it, but SaaS.
Yeah,
a subscription
for me,
software.
And for me, it's VSaaS. So I like the little small V in front of the SaaS acronym for vertical SaaS. I really like vertical SaaS.
Okay,
go.
cool. Okay. Primary reason a startup fails.
Product market fit.
PMF.
Yeah. Premature scaling, which means you start doing scaling activity before product market fit. Yeah.
Yep. So they don't have PMF. They don't have product
that's
market fit.
statistically proven. Yeah.
Okay. This is the last one. One word to describe your investment philosophy. One word.
Early. I mean, still, I would stick with that. I really, earliest.
Yeah.
I want to be talking to them.
That would be mine too, but I'll do a different word and say consistent. So consistently early.
Yeah.
It would be good. Yeah.
Or even just consistently investing in what works.
What Craig shared those nuggets of wisdom. Matter of fact, I want to, since you said that was the last one, I'll just add on. We'll maybe have a chance to talk about it. Craig's the same way. I have entrepreneurs that come to me after they get liquid from an exit and they go, hey, you taught me how to be an entrepreneur. You helped me get here. And now I'm getting attacked for investing in other entrepreneurs. You know, that happens commonly. And they go, you got to teach me how to be an angel investor. And I have a 4-page document I prepared because I had to do that so much to people. And I said, it's called Angel Investing, How Not to Get Screwed. and that's the name of the document. And it's because there's little ways in what you can do and how you approach it, which is very consistent with what you shared earlier, and that they have to learn. Angel investing is different than being an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And it's a different skill set. And that's why most new angel investors are coming off a liquidity event or wealth event. And their first year, they lose a lot of money. Like John Pastana was on earlier, and John Pastana lost $10 million his first year being an angel investor. That's because he
got burned from it, just like you said.
He's
talks
sick
about
of that.
He's like, I don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't do it anymore. I don't have the stomach anymore.
Yeah. So it's
That's
kind of
interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So I do want to jump into both of your actual philosophies and talk a little bit more about angel investing. But before we do that, I want to jump into your history a little bit more and just talk about, what you did and how you got to where you are and to become even an angel investor. So what was that company in 1978? Yeah. What did it do? And wherever you want to start, do you want to go earlier than that?
Yeah, no, I'll try to do as quickly as possible but it is important to kind of understand how this all happened.
Of course.
So I'm CS graduate of BYU, 1977. I'm a programmer.
That's cool. I did not know that.
And I did not want to be a programmer, but I graduated with CS.
Why? How did you get into that?
Well, I just had decided I wanted to be a businessman.
Yeah.
So and by the way, anybody who wants to be a businessman should get a technical
background,
undergrad degree.
Yeah.
And then maybe get an MBA or not. I never got an MBA. I wanted to. I applied to Harvard twice. I don't know what their problem is. I've spoken a lot at BYU and taught there, and I've thought maybe someday Harvard will reach out and ask me to speak at Harvard for some reason or another, and I'll get to turn them down.
Yes, there you go.
But that hasn't happened yet. Anyway, graduated, and I was looking for a job. I went to the placement center, and I saw a job that said financial consulting, starting salary to $30,000 a year. This is in 77. Sounded pretty good to me because IBM had offered me $13,000 to be a programmer. So I know it's a dark age. I graduated from BYU 50 years ago almost.
Oh my God.
It's terrible.
Is that 50 years ago, 77? That's like yesterday.
I even hate to say that stuff. In fact, when I introduce myself to my class every semester, I say, now that I've said that, if all of you get up and walk out, I don't blame you a bit.
you know that's what this generation loves, though. That was the first Star Wars movie.
What, 78 or 77?
77,
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I took a job which I thought was financial consulting, but it actually was selling life insurance for beneficial life insurance.
Okay.
And I was the worst life insurance salesman in history. And just before I starved to death, I went to my agency manager and I said, I can program. If you bought a computer, we're doing stuff. You guys are doing stuff with these rate books that I could put into the computer would be so much better than the way we do stuff. Mm-hmm. And unbelievably, amazingly, he said yes. He spent $40,000
on a computer
to buy 2 boxes as big as little refrigerators, and that was my computer. And I went to work. The first thing I did was program the estate tax calculation because we all sold estate tax insurance at that time. And then I started doing life insurance illustrations, and that's what I ended up doing for 25 years. So LifeLink became the standard, the industry standard for high-end life insurance illustrations. So business uses of life insurance, which are split dollar, deferred comp, typical scenarios where you sell life insurance to fund business needs. I actually don't even know how much of that's done anymore, but it was super popular.
To my knowledge, they're still doing illustrations, right? When you get a presentation from a life insurance salesman and they do it, they always come back with multiple illustrations.
No, definitely. No, my system is still these standards.
Still standard. Okay, yeah.
20 years after, is it 20 years since I sold my company? 04, yeah. It's 20 years since I sold my company.
Yeah, 21.
And it's still the standard.
Wow.
I just took, the very first employee I hired is just retired from my company.
Wow.
He worked there his whole life. And I took him to lunch and we were talking because I haven't had anything to do with the companies since I sold it.
Did you build that here in Utah then?
Yeah.
Well, I built it in Southern California. And then we moved here to Park City in 92.
Okay.
But anyway, I was glad to hear, and actually surprised, but glad to hear that it's still the standard, that there's competitors, but nobody's knocked us off as being the standard. So we're in use by 40 of the top 50 life insurance companies.
Well, entrepreneurs listening to this, hey, you want to disrupt something, go disrupt Craig's old business. There you go.
Well, what's interesting is that they've tried. We've had, and there's a bunch of, anyway, I won't get into all that.
Yeah.
So I start 2 years after he bought the computer. I'm still inside the one agency, basically working for them. But it's getting bigger than that. And I go to him and I say, I'd like to actually buy the computer from you. I'll give you free use of it because you've got me started and everything. But I'm going to set up outside of the agency so I can sell to other agencies. And amazingly, incredibly,
he said yes?
He shouldn't have.
Yeah.
He said yes.
Wow.
And so he gave me terms. I didn't have any money. He gave me terms. I moved the computer to an office, and I was all by myself, just all by myself.
Yeah.
And about a year later, I hired that guy that I mentioned, and started growing the company.
And just selling to agencies.
And the reason that I mentor is because I never had a mentor.
Yeah.
I had no clue what I was doing. All I knew was that I couldn't sell life insurance, and I had now 2 kids and probably a third one on the way. Well, anyway, at least 2 kids already that, guess what? They needed to be fed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you kind of had the same story. I feel like you mentor because you didn't really have a mentor.
Yeah.
I had no clue that I was creating an asset. It never occurred to me. I was just creating a job for myself.
Yeah. I didn't think of businesses in that way. I thought I work here forever and this is my job and I make money from it. I didn't realize I was creating an asset that actually was valuable to others.
You and I have much more in common. You're the only one who actually had that same experience then.
Yeah, I didn't.
You created a job for yourself.
I think back the first 12 years of doing that and building that company, how I didn't understand how the world worked outside of my cocoon. Does that make sense?
Exactly the same situation I had. And I'll tell you how my cocoon.
I learned a lot about operations though.
Yeah,
but
I'll tell you how my cocoon got broken. I went to a trade show, and in this trade show were a bunch of little companies like mine, because life insurance for some reason has spawned a bunch of little service companies, and we weren't direct competitors, but we're all selling to insurance companies. And Russ comes up, really good friends with all these guys. Russ comes up to me and he goes, "I just sold a piece of my company to GE." I'm like, GE, like the biggest company in the world? He goes, "Yeah, GE." And he tells me more about it. And I'm like, I want to do that. He says, "Well, I'll introduce you to my guy." And 6 months later, GE had bought a third of my company, and I was part of the largest company in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were owned by GE Capital. We weren't owned. I only sold a third. But I was part of the biggest. And by the way, I thought I was in business with the smartest people in the world.
Yeah, same exact. I went to conventions and trade shows, And I met these guys that were literally aggregating companies in our industry. I said, what do you mean aggregating?
Yeah, roll-ups.
Yeah, roll-ups and consolidation plays, which then I actually learned how to do myself. So I did 4 acquisitions of smaller little ones about the same size as me because I learned from that. And then all of a sudden I learned that these guys are actually going out and getting investors and buying these companies.
What in the world?
And then all of a sudden I got 4 offers to buy. It was the trade shows and conventions where I learned all that.
Man, I feel like business is so different today, though. Like if you think about it, you don't really hear about massive brands buying a third of a company, really.
Right.
It's usually an all or nothing.
I think corporate venture does do that.
They do
it
that?
happens a lot. Yeah.
But then also, like most entrepreneurs do get into entrepreneurship knowing that the acquisition is the end goal.
Well,
But no, that they know now. Your generation has been taught this by mentors and teachers like us. At BYU in our day, there was not even. I snuck into business classes and I learned how to do a spreadsheet in VisiCalc. Okay, you remember VisiCalc?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they didn't teach you that. Oh yeah, you can start your own company and you can build it, and there's this whole venture capital world and merger and acquisition world.
PE world. Yeah.
None of that taught to me. So I mean, I had to learn it out in the
If you don't know
field.
it today, you just stuck your head at the ground. But
Yeah.
in our day, it wasn't talked about.
Yeah.
My dad was an MBA from USC. He never even said a word to me that I might have been creating an asset.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So you just stumbled on it. So you take LifeLink to a point where
Well, let's hear about it. He did 30% to GE, but
Yeah, then what
I know
happened after that?
You're one of the interesting.
Well, you're talking about roll-ups.
Yeah.
So GE was rolling up.
Yeah.
And a year after, maybe a year and a half after we did our deal, they come to me again and they say, so we are going to now roll you guys together. There's 6 life insurance service companies. We're going to roll together under a company in Colorado Springs called ChannelPoint. So you're going to sell your stock, trade it for ChannelPoint stock, basically, and then we're going to IPO ChannelPoint, and you're going to make $50 million or who knows what.
Yeah. Did you do that?
Of course, I think I'm speaking to the smartest people in the world. So I'm like, I'm all in. Where do I sign?
Yeah.
I sign everything, turn my stock over, fly over to Colorado Springs, and I have a meeting that lasts for 2 days with the ChannelPoint people. And inside of 48 hours, I realize with this terrible sinking feeling that ChannelPoint is a complete fraud, that they have pulled the wool over the GE people's eyes, that they were a couple of Harvard MBAs, the Holland brothers. Can't remember their names anymore. But they had a whole bunch of really beautiful PowerPoint presentations. They had a huge staff. They had like 400 programmers working to build a platform that all of our companies were going to be, all our software would be integrated on, and we would serve the full spectrum of life insurance company needs.
What year was this? When was this?
This is
80s, 90s?
no, it's 01. It's
01.
It's 01. Oh, I sold originally to GE in 98, so it's about 2000.
Okay, 2000.
Okay.
This all happened.
So the internet was full throttle. It was the .com era. These ChannelPoint guys that said, we're going to do this insurance play and you're going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And you get a bad feeling.
Yeah.
And what happened?
So I didn't believe it at first. It took me another trip or two, but I did come home the very first time and I said to my people, I said, I'm really worried about this company. I don't want us wasting time. Because what I'd said to them is, give me something that we'll integrate our stuff into the platform. Mm-hmm. And they go, well, we're not quite there yet. I'm like, how could you not be there yet? Mm-hmm. You have to have the API. If you haven't got an API, I'm sorry, then your whole thing doesn't hold water. Mm-hmm. And you know how when you're an entrepreneur, you go by gut a lot.
Yeah.
And my GE board member, everything he'd said about it, my gut was telling me was just wonderful. And then I go to Colorado Springs and everything about Colorado Springs was just
horrible.
There was nothing
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I didn't like the 2 Holland brothers. I just felt that something was wrong.
Yeah.
And then I would talk to people, and everybody was hedging. And I came in, I'm like, how could this be? And then then I tried to tell the GE people, there's something stinks at ChannelPoint. And I realized that nobody was going to listen to me because their careers were on the line.
Yeah.
They had GE had $80 million in ChannelPoint, and there was a total of $500 million of investor capital in ChannelPoint, which would disappear a year and a half later.
And think about it, that's when $500 million was worth a lot more than today. Yeah.
In 2000, that's a lot of money.
$500 million. And I would go over there and I would say, if I just had the money that's falling through the cracks of this company,
What you could do.
I would do amazing things.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was 2000, because then we had the dot-com crash, which gave them an excuse for their failure.
Yes.
They were able to blame the failure of ChannelPoint
On the macro economy.
on something bigger than them, and they were able to get away with it. But anyway, they failed, and I was able to get my company back.
Okay, so you did sign the papers. The equity was in ChannelPoint. You are now a ChannelPoint-like product,
And I was an employee.
and you were an employee. And then they completely flopped in the dot-com era, and you were
What's
able
the
to pull it
mechanism?
back
How
out.
did you get it back? Was it in receivership?
Well, I thought I was getting
What-
fired because I had been making waves of saying that
Yeah.
ChannelPoint was a fraud and that I was the only company in the whole roll-up that was actually making money. And I was actually very mad, very
Yeah.
upset, because I knew that we weren't going to get $50 million for one thing.
Well, did they ever IPO or do anything?
No, because they blamed it all on the
stock
dot-com
market,
crash, and they
It
just
went into bankruptcy receivership. Okay.
just completely.
And then how did you get the opportunity to buy it
I thought
back?
I was getting fired. They called me to come over to the ChannelPoint headquarters. The meeting was the big boys and the legal people, and I'm like, this can't be good. And they made me wait too, which is just infuriated me. Anyway, I walked into the meeting and they said, you've said it 3 or 4 times that you'd like to get your company back. Do you really want your company back? And I said, yes. They said, okay, so we're here to do that today. So they let me have it back. We basically just swapped stock back. And the only thing I said was, by the way, when we swap back, I'm also buying the GE piece back. So the original third, I said,
I want the whole thing.
I said, look, I thought you guys were the smartest people in the world. Obviously, you're not. And so I want it completely out. So that's how I may be the only software entrepreneur you'll ever run into who owned a company for 25 years. And when I sold it finally in 2004, I owned 100% of the stock of the company.
Wow.
In a single individual.
So you recapped the whole company. You got 100% of it back.
So the dot-com crash, you got 100% back and then resold it again in 2004?
So now 2 things are happening in my life. I don't want to be in my company anymore. I started climbing mountains right about that time. I climbed 3 of the 7 summits, had some really cool experiences. And I was also looking to do something. I just wanted to diversify my life.
Yeah.
So I had offers to buy my company, because obviously after I took it back, I started looking. But they were half probably of what I thought it was worth because of the dot-com crash. Multiples were way down.
Let's go back. You got
So this is 2001.
to ChannelPoint. You got some cash for the selling, or did you just get stock?
No. I actually it cost me, because I had to go get a bank loan to buy back the third.
Oh, you had to buy the third from GE.
Yeah.
GE.
I got a really good price, by
So
the way.
you did a stock swap for what ChannelPoint got
For the 2/3.
But you got a good price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like I did that exactly right. I paid that loan off. I went and got a bank loan, which you cannot get as a small
But if you weren't
company.
gonna continue with your company and you hadn't had a liquidity event, what were you gonna do? I didn't. You said
Well,
you didn't
I mean, I had to take it back and then sell it.
Okay, sell it, okay.
So now my goal is to sell it, but I'm not hearing anything. I'm not hearing anything close to what I want.
Right.
And then I come home from a business trip, and we used to have answering machines.
Yeah, of course.
Can you imagine that?
I know.
And on the answering machine, like the third message was, "This is some sister from Elder Nelson's office. Could you and your wife make an appointment? Call back and make an appointment to come see Elder Nelson." And I knew, both of us were standing there listening to it. We knew in a half a second what it was, because we'd had other mission presidents called out of our ward. It was the right time of year. And we're like, okay,
Yeah.
that changes everything. So we this is November of 2001. It's November 2002 because we went in 03.
Yeah.
So I had been looking to sell for about a year and not hearing anything that made me feel good. So then we go off to Brazil in July 1st of 2003.
And
Really?
serve for the church for how long? How long were you called
3
down there?
years.
3 years.
And what do you do with a company? So I know for 6 months I'm going to be leaving for 3 years. What do you do, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to sell it, but I wasn't going to sell for what I was being offered. So I had been trying in my time as running the company to get a vice president that I could actually make president and run the company so I could just sort of be the chairman of the board and not be around.
Yeah.
And I'd failed with 2 guys that I hired. They just didn't work out. So guess who becomes my president, who was absolutely fantastic as a president?
Who?
A single mom who was hired not by me, but hired at the lowest rung of our company as a tech rep. She came on originally to answer phone calls and worked her way up the company to become our head of sales, even though we never really had a sales department. But she was our marketing and everything. And I made her the president when we left. Made her a really good deal if she'd stay for 3 years and had escalating bonuses over the 3 years. And she did fantastic.
Really?
So I go off to Brazil.
Yep.
And honestly, I think, so I believe that God blesses us if we understand that we're stewards of what we get and that it's not really ours to throw around. So I don't have a lot of toys. I just don't waste money. And I think God wanted me to know that I didn't sell my company, that he was going to sell it for me. So he sends me to Brazil.
Yeah.
And he makes me wait 6 months because in those 6 months, I had thought I was going to be involved with the company from Brazil. But guess what? When you arrive as a mission president,
No time.
you're like, you're going 100 miles an hour all day long, every day, and you lose interest in stuff at home really quickly. So he made me wait 6 months. 6 months into it, I got a really good offer. I had a broker that I'd been working with, and I said, so I'm going off, we're not getting anything, just kind of put it on ice. Mm-hmm. But he got an offer from a small public company in Atlanta, and it was about twice what I had heard before.
Mm-hmm. So
Probably
it's in
not
your range.
Probably not what I thought it was worth still, but I'm in Brazil. I want to be done with this whole thing. So I took the offer, all cash. Oh, by the way, I said, I've been through the stock deal. This has to be all cash. And and I said to my attorney who did the deal, I said, do I get a 2-for-1 here? Because we've done this whole thing already.
Yeah.
He said, no. So I sold the company from Brazil.
Were you still the 100% sole owner of it?
Yeah.
I got a phone call. This is one of my favorite moments in my life. I was at a youth conference in the middle of a field, and there was games and stuff going on around. And I was visiting because I was going to speak to the youth that night. I get a call on my cell phone, and it was the law firm saying that everything closed and the money's in your bank account.
Oh, yeah.
And I look at my wife, and I look around. There is not one person, probably within 1,000 miles, who I could tell the story to.
Yeah.
One of the biggest moments in an entrepreneur's life is...
What about your wife? Your wife cared.
Yeah, so my wife and I...
Yeah, you were just like, yippee.
We went yippee, and we couldn't...
It was fun to see Tyler have that moment with Dev Mountain. When he sold it, he and I, his 2 co-founders and one of the wives, we were behind a curtain hiding from all the employees there. Refresh on the phone when the money hits the bank account, and you get word that it's closed and really done. That's a really special moment for an entrepreneur.
Just like you,
right?
you remember exactly where you were, exactly what was going on, who you were around.
And it was fun to see. Look at that. So you had that moment in a field in Brazil. Then what happened?
That's it. I mean, they asked me not to be involved when I came back, the new owners.
Yeah.
And I respected that. So I have not been involved in my company. I've obviously talked to my people a lot, but and then the question was, should I start something else? And I'm like, do you know how hard it is to create a company culture?
Yeah.
it's not the company even. Even if you had a really good idea, and I'm sure I could have come up with one.
It's the people side of things.
It's creating a culture that actually works. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And we had a great culture at LifeLink, and I just didn't want to have to try to do that again.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
the funny
tough.
thing is after Tyler sold Dev Mountain, Craig, you'll be interested in this because he came to me. He, the three founders stayed on for a while, but he was the one that stayed on the longest, 18 months. But he was there, and one day he called me up and he goes, "Dad, how do you work this hard again?" Because the new owners kept him on, but no equity.
Yeah.
He goes, "When you don't own it."
Right.
It's hard.
And
when you don't
so-
have that ownership
so
outside,
for our
it's really
listeners
hard.
and followers, one of the principles is very interesting. After you start a company, you're not motivated the same in that company to stay on. It's because you aren't motivated because you're not an owner. But what you're also saying is it's kind of funny. Once you've got liquidity and financial security from selling your company, to go do another one, some people do it, but you go, that was hard.
Bless them.
And
I bless you, but
but you think about how steep of a climb. But how did we pull it off the first time? Because we had to.
That's right.
See, if you don't have to, that's why. Do you know that the stats are that this investing in a second company by a successful liquidity with his first company successful liquidates the second company, that's a bad investment. Because the hard work and what it takes to really build what you're saying, the motivation's not there because he doesn't have to.
that's right.
Right?
And
You
we
did
had
what you
to.
did at LifeLink. I did it with my first company because if we didn't do it, guess what? It was all down the tubes.
My kids were going to go hungry. And
Yeah.
that was not an option.
But when you don't have to do it, it's
Yeah.
hard to do it, isn't it?
So so when you sold your company, you came back from Brazil from that 3-year hiatus of business life. You come back. How do you get into the angel investing scene, or what does the venture scene even look like?
So-
Give me the picture
Well,
of Utah.
I knew you when you Fortaleza, right? Is that the mission? Was that the name of where you went? What's the mission name?
Porto Alegre.
Porto Alegre. Sorry, I went Fortaleza. Porto Alegre. I remember that whole experience. So I knew you before also BYU founders.
I had done
and,
a little bit of. I was the
and a little
I
bit in
worked
Utah Angels.
with the students CEO of the.
And I wonder
the
if you're doing
Entrepreneurial
Utah Angels.
organization.
But when you came back from mission, then it was mostly Utah Angels that we interacted with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what? So you came back. And,
So it's really easy. For 25 years I ran my company. Then for 3 years I ran my mission, and both of those were like 100%
all in.
Yeah.
all in.
Yeah.
It's just really cool to be able to.
Totally engrossing. Yeah.
Yeah. It was never right. You were never tired.
Yeah.
You love what you do, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you just do it.
Yeah.
And then on July 1st, 2006, I come back to my house, and there's a big party, and then everybody goes home, and I'm like, I don't have any missionaries, and I don't have any employees, I don't have a business, who am I?
Yeah,
exactly.
What am I? So I knew about Utah Angels, and I wanted to get involved there. And then I also had done some work with Steve Gibson and his class.
Yeah.
So I went to BYU and said I want to teach.
Yeah.
So
That's where we really got knowing each other. And Steve Gibson's one of my mentors in life. Great guy.
great guy.
Incredible guy. Yeah.
By the way, I do have to tell this story on Steve though.
Yeah.
The week that I left to go to Brazil, Steve, used to write a weekly column for the Deseret News on
Yes.
a business column.
Yep. It was a great one.
His column that week was, I feel so bad for a friend of mine who just left his company in the hands of inexperienced management and is gone for 3 years. I know many of these situations and they all end badly. And I know that this is going to end badly for my friend.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the basic. I
Yeah.
was like, he didn't use my name, but he might as well have put my name in
You
my
were the
picture.
exception to the rule. Yeah.
And so when I sold it and I got back and saw Steve, I looked at him and said, you remember that article you wrote?
He said, aha. Yeah.
I am the exception.
Yeah.
And I do understand. I mean, there are lots of bad stories about stuff that businesses that fall apart.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I know lawyers that their practice disintegrates after they go. It's a sacrifice.
I mean, isn't that the biggest problem when an acquisition happens today? The founders are disinterested, they leave, and the company starts
not
to
as well,
crumble,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like when you don't have those passionate leaders at the helm.
founder passion.
I give so much credit to Andrea, who was my president.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the one you left in charge.
You were really fortunate to have that.
And think about that. She wasn't hired. I tried. Again, I look at this as God's hand in things.
Yeah.
I tried my way. Hired 2 guys, neither of them worked.
Yeah.
Somebody else hires this girl who's a single mom. I mean, that's not somebody I would have thought of. It wouldn't have been top of mind as a candidate for president of the company. She works her way up and makes it so obvious that she should be running the place that she can't be denied.
Yeah.
And then she does an incredible job in the 3 years I'm gone.
That's fantastic.
Keeping it all
Let's
going.
do one more shout out to Steve Gibson, should we? Because he's a good friend of ours. Because this ties in. I don't know if you know, I was at BYU because of Steve Gibson. So what happened? What happened?
You and I are maybe your twins. We don't know it.
So here's what happened. When I'm at the height of InfoSpace, which was a big public internet company, really well known, and BYU Management Society, which has, for the listeners and viewers, BYU Management Society is alumni kind of activity of the business school at BYU, and they have chapters all around the world. Where they have a Seattle chapter where I was at, and Steve Gibson comes up and is the speaker one day at BYU Management Society. So I go to it, and I'm kind of well known because I'm in this hot company up there and all this, and I'm there talking, and Amazon's really hot. There were some people from Amazon in the early days there. But Steve Gibson comes up and talks about what he's doing at BYU, and he tells the story of 1-800-CONTACTs and working with Jonathan Coons and all of the stuff he was doing, teaching at BYU, and what happened with him being the first investor in 1-800-CONTACTs and what happened and all that. And I'm sitting there listening to this guy, and I know that my wealth is going to be such now that I can choose what to do in life. And I go, I want to be that when I grow up. I want to do what he's doing. And so I heard this and saw that he wanted to do. And I went up and talked to him and said, I want to be you when I grow up. And he literally put the word in at BYU, and Don Livingstone, of course, and the dean, Ned Hill, and others started making contacts. And then when I retired from InfoSpace, they called up and said, if you're not going to do anything, come down and do this. And that's how I got there.
And when did you get there?
In 2001, I did it remotely to see if I liked it. And then I moved in 2002.
So I didn't get there. So,
like
so 2002, we would have met.
Yeah, through the founders group.
And also I was helping run the student entrepreneur organization.
Yeah, there you go. You were doing that, and I came in and did the lecture series and all these things.
Yeah.
So we got to, that's why I knew
there.
when you went on your mission. I can't believe it's that long ago you went on a mission, because it does seem like we knew each other really well when you went on your mission. And then you were gone for 3 years. So yeah.
So anyway, when I came back again, it was because of Steve Gibson.
Yeah.
Same story.
So hopefully Steve Gibson watches as we have to point at this episode, because he's getting a big shout. Steve's just a stellar individual, a great entrepreneur, a great teacher, and a good mentor. And look at what he's accomplished with he loves to teach entrepreneurs that exit about the second half of life, how to live a great life. Like you came home, said, who am I? What do I do? And Steve Gibson likes to help people figure that out in their life. It's cool. Anyway, enough about Steve, but Steve, you're an awesome guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you get into the venture scene in Utah and you're just like inspired by Steve Gibson, both of you, it sounds like you want to be that guy, getting in early, having the 1-800-CONTACT experience. How did you start doing that? Did you look at BYU as that pool?
No.
Or did you just...
Because I knew Gary Williams and John.
Yeah.
And both of them.
Gary and I were the two full-time people doing it when you were around. Yeah.
And both were in Utah Angels.
Yeah.
And so I kind of begged to be part of Utah Angels, and they went, I guess.
No, it's great.
So wait, who started you? So how did it Utah Angels come?
Utah
to be?
Angels goes before me and Gary. It's Scott Frazier and Steve Gibson and a couple other guys. Were the real nucleus at the beginning of that, I believe.
When I came in, Greg Warnock was big.
Greg Warnock, and Paul Alstrom.
Yeah, and Paul Alstrom.
Yeah, and so they started it, but that was like 99-ish.
But
before we were around. Yeah.
The interesting thing is that right before I left to go, actually, as I was getting on the plane
to Brazil,
to go to Brazil, Gary Williams and I had talked to a student entrepreneur that Gary was super high on, and his name was Dave Bateman.
Yes.
And Gary and I both wrote checks to Dave for a company called Property Solutions.
Yeah.
And that turned into Entrata.
Yeah.
So that was my very first angel investment. So
wow.
Really was?
Yeah.
Do you know that I went on vacation and Greg Warnock went on vacation the week Gary was putting it together because he kind of led the deal as an angel investor. And we come back, both Greg and I, and Gary closed it. And I said, well, where do I send the money? He goes, well, you guys are not in. So Greg and I didn't get in that. Can you believe it? Because I was all going to do it, but we both went on vacation and that just happened. And you got in there and what a great investment. You know, that was amazing what happened with Property Solutions too, and what they did.
We could go through that forever.
Yeah,
but
no, we could. Yeah.
Here's one thing I'll say. Lots of people have lots of things to say about Dave Bateman. I'll just say this: he had plenty of chances not to take care of his early investors.
Yes. And he did,
but he always did.
Yeah.
And I still own about half of my Entrata stock that and it's a.
That's one of your 1,000.
What I've sold is over 1,000x.
Yeah.
The part that I've sold was already over 1,000x, and I don't know what the rest will be.
Yeah. So I'll say this about Josh, James, John Pastana, and Dave Bateman, all three of them, because I mentored Dave, went from dearelder.com and how he parlayed the 400,000 he made there into Property Solutions and won the business plan competition. All that was involved. All three of them. There's lots of things said about those three very famous entrepreneurs in Utah history, but they really took care of the early investors. They literally, I mean, many times they could have made a decision to think of themselves only, but they did not want to stick it to their early investors.
I feel like there was a lot of chivalrous stuff like that back in the early days of the tech era. Like a lot of founders did that.
They got mentored a lot. The mentoring started getting really strong, and they got mentored. They are where they are because of all the mentoring they got, and then they took care of the mentors that put money into them. And like I said, there's a lot of things that can be said. And a lot of people talk about those individuals in many different ways, but you have the same feeling I do. I respect them for that.
I always take an opportunity to say that in respect to Dave Bateman because...
And Dave, Josh, and John have never been anything but respectful to me and treated me with real respect.
Yeah. There we are.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was your first angel investment.
Actually, that wasn't my first. Now that I think about it, it was my second. I did invest in a company called House Values. My broker, the one who sold the company, he brought it to you. He was in Seattle, and he said, "You got to do this thing." He actually did two. He did a golf company that failed, but the first one we did was called House Values. House Values IPO'd. I just put 25,000 in it, but I got a 25x on that.
Oh wow!
When it IPO'd, it took about 5 years, and I was like, "That is literally the coolest thing in the world."
Yeah.
So, but then I had written the check. The IPO happened while I was in Brazil, so I didn't really get to celebrate. But I'd written a check to Property Solutions as I was leaving, and Property Solutions, I've been in that company then since 2003.
Yeah.
22 years.
That's crazy. Yeah. A lot of people don't understand how long the life cycle of a company is. They think it's like a flash. And
here's the other thing.
Yeah.
Lots of people sell out when they have the first opportunity to sell out. I'm not. I'm a holder.
Yeah.
Because
until what? What's your exit strategy then? Like, what is your theory there?
I say so. I also have a lot of Podium stock still.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the stats. I don't know if you want to share, but you were the first investor in Podium.
I'm the first money in Podium.
At an incredible valuation. You put in a chunk of money, and Podium, like Entrata, these are Utah unicorns that achieve $1 billion status.
Yeah. And so I had a chance to sell Podium stock, and I said, if I sell it, what do I buy with it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The company's still
another
really
boat, another car.
Well, I mean, what other investment would I put it in?
Yeah.
And Podium still looks so good to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they've been through up and down over this last couple of years, but they've now that they're 100% pushing AI into what they're doing, and in my view, they're looking really good. So I see no reason to sell.
That's awesome. So, but then what is the exit strategy? At what point are you going to get out of those investments? If you're holding something for 20 plus years, like what are you doing?
Well, the goal would be to
IPO, public stock,
or be
or
acquired.
big sale to another company.
Yeah, and at what would you consider to be a full valuation?
Yeah,
and
so like any kind of 100% like liquidity event.
Yeah.
that's where you'll be like, okay, fine. I don't want to take chips off the table on partial exits. You want to do wherever the founders and the majority of the cap table are exited.
Taken chips off the table, both for Entrata and Podium, because it just made sense.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that and just for our listeners viewers that will love this discussion, and you and I are really similar in a lot of ways and different how we got into things and what we do. But I've learned to take early exits when I get offered like, a 20, 40x return. If I'm looking at where do I think this team's going to take it and how is it going and where are we at in the economic cycle? Like if we're at the bubble, then I'll take it. An early exit, just as you're coming out of the trough of a macroeconomic cycle, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But if you're in 2021, I had 7 exits in 2021. 3 were early exits, 4 were acquisition. So the early exits, I still feel good about even today, even if I potentially gave up upside because I was at a bubble then. And all the companies that didn't make it out in 2021 that I took an early exit in, they've gone down in value or in potential exit value. And that's, so it's, like you said, it just has to make sense.
Yep.
Yeah. I just don't see how you see like a 20, 30, 40x return and say, nah, I'm good, right? It's like in investing, especially early stage investing, like when you're getting...
I'll tell you why you would say no to it.
Yeah.
It's really easy.
What is it?
Where are you going to deploy that money? What's
that it could grow.
What's the alternative?
Yeah.
If you believe there's more growth upside, what is the alternative, right? But if you think you're capturing at the top of the market, that's my point. Like 2021 was a crazy year. Anything you got offered that year, I knew that in a few years we were going to face, the bubble was going to burst.
I think we talked about this back in 2021. Just even the early stage valuations were crazy. Like what entrepreneurs were trying to sell their first checks at.
Craig,
right?
you'll love this. We 2 hours ago spoke to an entrepreneur. I'm not going to say anything more about who it is or whatever. This is an entrepreneur that in 2021, with a mobile app idea, consumer facing, very hard market, right? You know how hard those are. Got $2.8 million at a 15 million valuation, no revenue.
In Utah?
In Utah. Okay.
That's a collector's item.
Yeah. But that is just that numbers, those stats right there are very fascinating. And that's what 2021 was like. That is insane. If you just look at what the business was and the valuation, all that. And if you had any sense that you were at the bubble of the market, you knew what was going to come later, right?
What are you saying is insane about that deal though? The 15 on 2.8.
Pre-product, pre-revenue.
The valuation's too high.
All of it, everything.
But like to explain
the amount of money she got.
But to explain to the entrepreneur, right, that's listening right now, like why is that?
If you are offered that deal as an entrepreneur, take it.
Yes.
So you're saying that's insane from an investor's view.
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Yes.
But to the entrepreneur, that's an amazing deal for the entrepreneur.
Except for there is a problem, and this is great discussion. There is a problem. If you get too high a valuation and too much money, 2 things creep in. You will squander a lot of that money because you have the money to spend and try to fix problems with money instead of ingenuity and creativity. And then number 2, the valuation, you have to grow into that valuation. There's immense pressure on a young entrepreneur to get a high valuation and grow into that valuation and the pressure. And then you'll start spending money on this sales effort, this marketing campaign, and all of a sudden the money's going out the door and you're not getting the traction. Yeah. You've seen it a lot of times.
You don't want to go 15, 12.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying the entrepreneur could shoot themselves in the foot, raising 2.8 on 15.
Let's run a hypothetical.
If they don't earn that next round valuation.
Let's run a hypothetical. Let's just say this. Let's say Podium had raised $3 million at an 18 million value. Podium's a great company, right? In hindsight, a lot of entrepreneurs can sit around and say, oh, they deserve that. Look at what they became. But if they had tried to go raise $3 million at an 18 million valuation or $2 million at a 15 valuation, whatever, you would have never invested in it. Most people wouldn't have invested in it. And maybe they wouldn't be who they are, where they're at today. By getting a great investor at a $2 million valuation that could give them the capital they needed then, that could mentor them and help them navigate the first early stage. Then they were able to go out and parlay their traction and success into getting that climb up. But they could have killed themselves in the foot and never gotten to a second round had they done that. You see my point? Yeah. And that's a fascinating thought. And a lot of entrepreneurs today don't get that. That's one of the messages we'd like people to understand is you've got a lot of building to do at the early stages. Get as much as you need at a reasonable valuation, get great investors.
I think what you guys are saying are the actual terms of the deal actually mean a lot.
Actually matter.
Yeah, because a lot of entrepreneurs focus so much on that problem solution or the product that they're devising or what they're trying to build, the market they're trying to go into, where actually fundraising to the investor, it's really important, the terms and the actual deal structure more than I think the entrepreneur thinks.
Yeah.
So what key factors do you consider when assessing a potential investment?
I would just say this for all founders who are trying to raise money. Raise as little as possible, as late as possible. But whenever you raise enough to get you to an inflection point.
Yeah.
Have a goal. So I'm going to get to X amount of revenue and I think I need 800,000. I think I need $1 million, but I'm going to take 750. Take as little as you can take because you can only sell that equity once. And that equity that you sell for 750,000 right there, you're going to hate that later on. When you're selling, if you're able to sell at $100 million valuation, you're going to think back about selling 15 million valuation equity.
But to counter that though, Craig, is like, let's say the entrepreneur wants to raise $1 million, but they're like, okay, I'm going to do 750. But their attitude towards that is, I'm not going to raise 750 on a $3 million valuation. I'd rather go raise 2.5 on a 10 or a $15 million valuation. Because some people in the market, some investors will pay attention to that kind of deal, right?
And there's some investors that won't even look at a small deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that.
So I think they're trying to shoot higher to dilute and sell less equity, right?
But then 9 times out of 10 or 19 out of 20, my experience, and Craig can say if that's his experience, that entrepreneur will not live up to the expectations there. And here's another thing that happens. Literally, when they get more money than they need, when their employees come say, let's go to this trade show, buy the $30,000 booth and $50,000 to construct the materials for the booth and send 4 people instead of 1 person to it. And all of a sudden it's $100,000 to go to a trade show. And they've burned 100,000. Then they come back. What leads did we get? What revenue did we get? Oh, we didn't get anything from that because I had 2.8 million to spend instead of the 750. They would have never done that. Right. Does that make sense?
So, but what if a frugal entrepreneur comes, you love the product, you like it, but the deal is that $2 or $3 million on a $15 or $10 million valuation? Like if there's a true frugal entrepreneur, do you just automatically say no?
No entrepreneur when their team
you're saying
knows there's millions of dollars in the bank, they're not going to be the ogre to say no. We're going to not buy a booth. We're just going to go to the hotel next door and go into that trade show.
Let me finish that scenario though. So are you saying by an entrepreneur coming and touting that deal, that indicates that he is not the frugal type of entrepreneur that you want to be investing in? Does the deal communicate that?
For me, it's simpler. I used to not want to do a deal if the valuation was over 3. Now it's like 5, right?
Yeah,
that's exactly where we're at. Go ahead.
Shh! Don't tell people that.
and I know it's an arbitrary number, but it's just that every time you start, it's a first round raise, and I think this is exactly the same thing John's saying. It's a first round raise, and they're talking about a 15 million valuation. It's like, show me how we're justifying this.
No, show the investor how are you going to get even a 10x.
I know, I get that from the investor standpoint. Like, I'm not gonna invest in an infinite multiple when my exit multiple is only going to be 10, 20x at the end of the day, right? Yeah. I get that. That's really off. But from the entrepreneur standpoint, they're saying, rather than only raising $700,000 on a $3, $4, $5 million valuation, I'd rather go take a run at raising 2 or 3 on a 10 or 15. It's a better fraction
Right. It's
for
the
them.
same. Mathematically, it works out the same. The cost, the price per share is the same. They're just going to sell a lot more shares.
Yeah.
And so I get that, but
It's back to those two problems again.
Yeah.
Too much money will cause squandering of capital, which is not a good signal for any entrepreneur to put out to the market. Yeah, I raised $3 million.
So how do you guys compete?
And I don't have any left, and I'm nowhere where I need to
So
be.
how do you guys compete then when there are people in the market that are funding those kind of deals, right? We just heard, obviously that was
you have to let 'em
2021.
go.
What?
I have no problem letting them go.
Yes.
And you say, okay, that's not for me.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree with that. I'm just wondering if you guys are on the same brand. Because I honestly do think that the deal structure changes my opinion of a deal. I really do. I like, if I love the entrepreneur, if I love the market, if I love the product, if I think they have product market fit, but the deal is wrong, it really does kill a complete investment, right? Do you guys not agree on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Everything's got to be right.
everything
How
has
are
to
we
be
doing
right.
on time here?
I mean, we probably got about 5 to 7 more minutes.
Okay. Should I ask? I'm going to ask one more question. Do you have something you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I have a lot I want to talk about, but let's go wherever
Yeah,
the
I just-
conversation
I
goes.
have 4 things you want to hear from me.
Okay,
Okay,
what?
go for it.
So
Yeah.
one of the things I don't even remember what this is. What's your second section?
My second section is like investment
There
philosophy
you go.
or like notable
So
deals
we'll
you've
put
done.
this under investment philosophy.
Okay.
And so let's just talk about how we evaluate investments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So number one is a team itself. The biggest red flag for student teams is no clear leader.
Yeah.
So equal partners. Anybody who's listening to this podcast, any investor, if you want to raise money, well, actually, if you want to survive
Yes.
as a company,
If you want to last,
do not do an equal partnership.
like
If there's
25,
two or
25,
three-
25.
If
Yeah.
there's 2 or 3 of you, don't go third to third or 50-50. There are some exceptions. Podium is still a 50-50 company. Eric and Dennis do a magnificent job as partners, but they are by far the exception.
By far the exception. Yeah.
There's a scripture that says where there are 2 intelligences, one is smarter than the other. The entrepreneur variation on that is where there are 2 partners, one is working harder than the other.
Yeah.
And the one who works harder will hate the one who doesn't work as hard.
Yeah. A lot
So-
of resentment. Yeah.
So do not set yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Within every equal partnership's formation is the seeds of its own destruction.
Okay. So you wise sage mentors, for those entrepreneurs that are listening that are in that mode right now where they're devising a cap table, how do you go about that to be fair and keep your partners aligned?
I know it's the hardest thing in the world because BYU used to send them out of the Crocker Fellowship. We used to get some out of Sandbox. Sandbox is doing a great job now. But the earlier you have the conversation, the better. And I've done it, I don't know how many times, 50 times probably, where I've looked at a team of 3 and I said, this is never going to work like this. The 3 of you need to go sit down in a room and decide
Who's the leader?
who is actually the leader. And by the way, you already know.
Yeah.
You just haven't said it to each other. Who is the leader? And then that person is going to own not a majority necessarily, but more of the stock than the others. So that any investor who comes in will be able to tell by watching who the leader is and then tell by looking at the cap table. It has to be that way.
100% agreeing with Greg.
Yeah. So you're saying have that hard conversation up front.
The sooner the better.
The sooner
What's
the
your
better.
other 3? What's the other 3?
And by the way,
Oh,
have me sit down with you
Yeah.
and explain the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'll even sit in with as you because I can help pick the leader.
Yeah.
And I'm usually when I'm mentoring this situation, I've usually got the one I want to become the leader, and I'm telling them this is not the time to be remembering all your primary lessons.
Yeah.
You need to take over this company. You're going to hurt some people's feelings,
yeah.
but it needs to happen right now. The sooner the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100%.
What other investment philosophies do you have?
Or what other items were you going to bring up?
Yeah.
Let's get those in before we run out of time.
Yeah, I want to hear them.
Number one skill as an entrepreneur, absolutely number one in my view, is to learn to manage expectations. So, and I tell the story this way. My favorite line when I visited a life insurance company, my favorite line as I described my company was this: we're just the dumb software guys. And you go, what? I love telling this to my class. I go, think about it for a second. I don't want to end up in a lawsuit with a life insurance company, right? They're giant. I'm just a little tiny company. So how do I manage my way around that? I don't make claims to be anything I'm not.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't make any claims at all. And I know that all of my competitors are in there going, we deliver perfect software on time, all the time. And I'm like, actually, we don't. We're just the dumb software guys. And I'm allowed to make mistakes then. I've never gone back to a contract and referred to terms in a contract. I just go, we're doing the best we can. We have a partnership with your people in the home office. We're working as hard as we can. And you know what? I ran a company for 25 years, was never sued, and I never sued anybody.
Yeah.
You only
Manage
get there
expectations.
by managing expectations.
Now we're running a venture fund, and we have a lot of very excited entrepreneurs that we've even invested in, and it's like we're getting reports, we're getting the data, we're doing these weekly or bi-weekly check-ins, and it's talked about for the last 3 check-ins the same exact tactic or the same exact expectation. Hey, that's not happening, or that's not, and we're teaching them about under promise and over deliver. Do not over promise and under deliver, because that just puts you off.
I preach this for years. It's so fun to see him. And you and I do have a lot of scary similarities in philosophy.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the most important skills, and nobody ever talks about it.
Yeah.
Oh, I
talk about the opposite.
But it's not just with investors. It's also with customers, like you were saying.
Well, I was going to finish that. So now, if you're thinking about managing expectations of, in this case, it was your customers, but you also do the same thing with your employees, right?
And your spouse.
Extend it to every relationship that you have.
Every relationship, yeah.
If you manage expectations, your life will be so much easier.
Yeah, that's a great quality.
Yeah, well, one of my lessons I teach with my wife, halfway through my career, she wanted me home at 6 o'clock for dinner. The kids couldn't wait past 6. They were hungry at 4 and 5. And I would come home 7, 8 as a busy entrepreneur. Finally,
Looks like you were able to eat all right.
Yeah.
so finally what happened was my wife said, she put the foot down and said, we got to fix this somehow. So then I committed to say, okay, I'm going to be home by 6, and 6 to 8 is completely family dinner, bathing the kids and doing all that. And because I was bad and then it was kind of funny. I started saying, I'm going to just be home by 5:45. And then all of a sudden, when I said I'll be home by 6, but I would walk in at 5:45, I was a hero, an absolute hero. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And even in life like that, by the way, that's one of the secret tips to keeping family life good is you commit that to your spouse when you're a busy entrepreneur so that life stays good.
Yeah. I like that tip.
Yeah.
Okay.
What else you got, Craig?
Yeah, what else,
These
Craig?
are golden.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a very good one.
Okay.
So these are not related. I'm not in any order, but this is really important for any founder who's going to raise money. I know that the way that you're feeling as you walk into a presentation, let's say you're going to make a pitch, or if you're like at a pitch event,
Yeah.
you get really scared. Or if you're going to an investor, like an angel group, and you're going in there, you're making this pitch, and you're scared. I have a thought that will turn it around completely for you. When I had my very first meeting with the GE guy, I've sold a third to GE, and I have a GE guy on my board. He comes in the office. He's looking around. He's saying, this is one of the best run small companies I've ever seen. You really do a good stuff here. And I'm like, Dan, I can't thank you enough for letting me be part of GE and for doing what we've done. And he stops and he looks at me and he goes, you really don't understand, do you? He said, you know that GE has $6 billion of free cash flow a year, and we have to deploy that someplace. You solved the problem for me.
Yeah.
And I went,
Yeah.
every investor who's out there is looking to deploy money.
Yeah.
If you have a good company that can take his money and put it to use, you're solving a problem for the investor.
Yes.
So quit worrying about trying to solve your problem and go out there with confidence and realize that you're actually solving a problem for them.
I think I learned that lesson not when I was raising or pitching, but when I sold my company. When our company was sold and I thought it was for an amazing amount of money, and I'm just like, this is so much money. And the company that bought us was a multi-billion-dollar company. And I go to there, the very first meeting I have post-acquisition, and they're sitting there talking numbers, raising all my budgets, raising up every department's pay, everything. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, man, these guys have so much money and they are so happy to put it into us so that they can make that money grow even more, right? It was like, we did solve their problem.
Think about the confidence that gives you as an entrepreneur.
But not even that.
asking for money.
It taught me a really good life lesson of there is so much money in this world. And there's so many people wanting to deploy it and use it and make it work for them that it's like, that's business.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So get that fear because you'll make a much better presentation when you do it with confidence.
Love that one too.
That's awesome. Good one.
Okay. Do we got one more? Or is that all of them?
Well, my last one was product market fit. And I preach and preach and preach product market fit. And I don't think most people understand it because they'll come to you and say, we have product market fit. And I'd say, okay, what were your sales last month? Oh, we're having a hard time selling. Guess what? When you have product market fit, you every time you meet with somebody, they buy your product.
Yeah.
If it's not happening, either your product's no good, or you haven't identified who your customer is.
Exactly. It's one of those two.
You could be missing on your messaging.
Yeah.
That too.
One of those three.
But messaging's not even it, because if you find a customer or market and you have a product, they're gonna want it no matter the messaging. It's usually just literally product market fit. It's I hate those excuses for entrepreneurs too, but at the same time, it's like
because then they go spend more money on marketing.
Yeah, because then they'll change their brand. And
they don't realize they've got a square peg trying to force in a round hole.
Yeah.
Let me add to that what you said about their selling, but also, and this comes from a call earlier this morning. We did a mentoring call. Again,
we're busy
selling a product for $5,000 to $15,000. Okay, and it seems like it's really good selling all these ones. And then the entrepreneur let us know, but I have a churn problem. Because churn is actually the symptom too of lack of product market fit, right? Because the charisma of a founder can often get what we call brute force sales.
Yeah.
They force it through on their charisma and selling tenacity, right?
Yep.
And then the customer buys but doesn't renew and repeat.
Yeah.
That's a product market fit problem too.
Because even if you get initial sales.
That's a nefarious one, because when you can get the first sale but not get the repeat sale, that is really the real test of product
false
market
confidence.
fit.
Is renewals.
Yeah.
And that's what JP, John Pastana, who was on our podcast, he talked about that. He said, he's like, I actually don't think you have product market fit until renewals are renewing.
Yeah.
And once you have renewals and have very low churn, if any churn at all, that's when true product market fit comes in. So anyways, this is great stuff. I bet me, you,
I hope our
my dad
listener
could
viewers
talk
know
forever.
that literally you are one of the legends of angel investing. I mean, I point to Scott Fraser, you, and a handful of others as literally the backbone of angel investing in Utah. And what we have in Utah now, you are a big part of, because in the 2000s was a great decade. 2010's an even better decade. And I think we're headed into another great era for Utah. And Craig, just as a participant in that ecosystem, thank you for being you and what you've
and thank you for trusting us with some of that angel investing dollars. We feel like we're doing a great job. And again, this is a great time to be investing, a great time to also be building. You should be building right now, starting your venture so that you can capitalize when this market is coming back. You're poised to be one of the ones.
It's a great time to be an entrepreneur now. But really, I hope the listeners and followers just know Craig Earnshaw incredible advice and golden nuggets. And I don't know, a lot of people, we're actually getting more of an audience now. It's building up, and you might get some contacts here. So
I was going to say,
people are going to come in and want to talk to you and mentor with you.
That's how I was going to actually end the podcast, because we are up for time. Nick, who helps us out with the podcast here, was waving his hand at me saying we got to end it. But, you can reach out to Craig. You can find Craig on LinkedIn. You can find Craig all over the internet. You can reach out to us. If you have any questions about whatever you're building, whatever you're doing, we're here. Go to startupignition.com, find Craig online. All three of us at this table, I think, would be more than happy to have a jam session with you.
We love early stage
and
stuff.
give mentoring session. Like Craig says, define your investment philosophy. He just said early. So it doesn't matter where you are. I think Craig, John, or I would all love to have a conversation with you. But that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much, Craig, for coming by.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Dad, for participating. And thank you for listening and tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, do all those beautiful things. And, again, hit us all up. We all want to be a part of your story and what you're doing. So thank you. And that's it. We're signing off for the Startup Ignition podcast.